Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Spirit Society of Baltimore's Saturday Live. And before we begin, we always open up with a small reading from the book Happy Life, just to set the tone. Then we'll do our prayer, introduce our speaker, and sit back and relax and enjoy the beautiful message of tonight. So let's first read a message from Joanna DeAngelis to Random Message. She says, page 27. Keep your thoughts in a wholesome and optimistic rhythm. The mind is a powerful dynamo. According to how you think, you will attract similar vibratory responses. Those who cultivate sickness always become sick. Those who persevere in health always overcome infirmities. Think rightly, and God will inspire you to find the best solutions. An uplifting, good thought is an unspoken prayer that never goes unheard. Beautiful reminders from Joanna to cultivate positive thoughts. So join me in our opening prayer, connecting our hearts and our minds to our spirit guides, our spirit mentors of the SSB, our divine creator, and our brother Jesus. We ask that you inspire and guide our speaker, Leo, this evening to be the vessel of tonight's message. And may each one of us that are listening be able to receive with an open heart all that we need to learn and be blessed with. May each mind and heart that is connected to this meeting receive a shower of blessings, of healing, of clarity, and inspiration. We ask that you continue to guide and protect our group so we may continue to enlighten lives together, sharing this beautiful message of Spiritism. We thank you, and so be it. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we welcome Leo, who's continuing on his study on his book. And Leo, I don't want to take up too much of your time because I'm actually really eager to hear what tonight's chapter is all about. So please go ahead and share.
Well, thank you, Kirsten, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon and good evening for those who will be following us. And why not say even good morning? Because some of us may be actually checking this message later on in morning hours. But it's good to be here, giving continuation to this amazing book, to the chapters of the book Dawn of a New Era. Today we will be studying chapter 10 and chapter 11. Forgive me there, I actually kept session 5, but it's really, this is session 6. I forgot to change that minor detail there, which it can be big, but forgive me for that. In any case, we would like to start today as a reminder for all of us that what we share and here, as well as what Manuel de Miranda, the author of this book, through the hands of the selflessness medium Divaldo Franco, is not an attack on this or that religion or an attack of a group of people. And the reason I'm saying this, because we see a lot of, or we read in the book, a lot of discussion about, a rabbi going against Christianity or the new Christians, in terms of when we refer to those who are following Spiritism and those who are following Christianity in a new way, if we can say that way. So there's no attack, but technically showing us what happens to us when we continue on the old ways of the past, and when we divert of utilize of our energies to goodness. Yes, we should utilize our energies, and we're going to see a little bit of this later on, to cultivate good thoughts But that doesn't mean, as Joanna D'Angelo, herself just mentioned in this message that Kirsten brought, but not to mistreat others or make our lives miserable. And again, we're going to talk about this. It's a reminder for us to show that we all, and when I say we all, us who follow Judaism, us who follow Christianity, or even Islam, we all come from the same message. And in when we study religion and Western religion, we will see that these two religions, they come from Abraham, right? So they're denominated Abrahamic religions, right? So it's beautiful how we all come from one thought, right? We have different beliefs, different ways to see the world or certain situations, but all Abrahamic religions. And that brings us together, as well as the message that these religions bring to us in order for us to rectify the past and as we deal with our present, projecting us in the future in such a way that we're not going to see the despair within ourselves first and outside of us as well as we work collectively. So that is just just to open up this message. As we were studying, the kind message from our mentor said, say it, because I have heard from others personally, as well as it's very easy for us to fall into the temptation to think that the spiritism is now working against this or that religion, or even Christianity is bringing to us. Quite the opposite. We're trying to bring everything together as we again clear our past. And once more, we will exemplify that today. With no further ado, past this opening or this alert for all of us, let us dive into the content of these two chapters. We finally, I cannot say that enough, we have an encounter with the rabbi who was actually going after a spirit center. And this spirit center is actually was being attacked in such a way, the people who was going there, the people who worked there, so that they would fall into their own temptations, into their own past. That it's important for us to point out that attacks that happens in our lives, obsession, as we learn in Spiritism, the continuous cultivating of one thought doesn't happen because of the outside is generating that on us. We have to leave a door open, right? People only come to the parties that you put up on in your home, right? In the parties of our hearts, guess what? It will be a door open for obsessions as well. So we need to kind of contextualize a little bit these happenings, what's happening in the book as well in our lives, so in order for us to make sure that we understand and we don't fall the same way. So chapter 10, let me get myself here together. Chapter 10, we'll see that we will talk about the encounter with the darkness, which is the encounter with the rabbi. And chapter 11, the enlightened activities continue, right? It's a continuation that happens on chapter 10. We have covered, 9 chapters. We're past halfway of the book at this point. We ask you to please go and read the book, purchase the book through Leal Publisher, and you can start reading the book. Please discuss your questions with me, with the group, whoever you think that is also reading the book, because it is a continuation of the planetary transition, but you can also pick up and start reading, because there's a lot that you can learn from it, okay? So, again, encounter with the darkness. Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, and we're going to say Mr. Miranda because it's quite of a name, as we like to just shorten so we can go on. We'll bring some reading as usual, but just bear with me so we can go ahead and try to go through this content, because it's quite a bit. He started by saying, at 2 a.m. we were occupying our positions, much as would occur during normal mediumistic activity at any spiritist center when Dr. Bezerra Menezes explains to us. I just want to point out that this is actually a beginning or a continuation of, I say beginning, in the spiritual realm, in terms of the group of the Spirit Center working together to continue the work that he had done before they went to bed. So this is a congregation of, or the people, the incarnated ones, through the sleep time coming together to work and give a continuation to what they start. It's a beautiful thing, because sometimes we wake up in the morning, we have dreams and say, oh my God, I dream with this, I dream with that. And not necessarily have to be a spiritist, not necessarily have to be someone who, is doing a specific work at the spiritist center. But sometimes you could be asked or called to help another family member or another group of people whom you esteem, whom you have your heart for it, and you go over there during the sleep time to help this individual. It happens to all of us, and sometimes when we get up in the morning, we have no idea. But one thing I would like to remind you, that if you have that feeling that even though you dreamed with something really strange, but the feeling is good, guess what? You were there to help. You were doing something constructive, and that's the beauty of what that one of the beautiful things that Spiritism brings to us, that we're always active. The body is resting, but the mind, the spirit, is actually working and doing different things, learning, right? As well as, unfortunately, and we have seen some other literatures as well, that the spirit could be doing things that are not so, let's say, helpful for him or herself or to the group of people that they are around. So it happens to all of us. We really have to make sure that we are cultivating good thoughts. No wonder why now we see that Joella DeAngeli brought this message through Kirsten earlier today. So let's get back to it. It is a work that is being continued. So he mentions that Bezerra de Menezes, Dr. Bezerra de Menezes says, I think that we will soon be joined by Rabbi Eliakim Ben Sadok. This is the rabbi that we have been mentioning since planetary transition, who by now is well informed about our institution's defenses. Feeling that he has been attacked, he will soon appear at the head of his troops to challenge us to a confrontation using the weapons of evil and destruction that he is familiar with. He had not even finished the sentence when we heard a screech voice coming from outside, amplified by a special apparatus, inviting our mentor to come out and face the consequences of his act and of retaliation against the forces of salvation of mankind. And they called themselves, as they call themselves, ironically. There were many verbal and physical provocations and retaliation. This is not on the book, but I just brought that message, that statement there, because we're gonna focus on the positive. But rest assured that Manuel Filomeno and Miranda brings all the retaliation, what the rabbi says, in terms of, that he's not there to converse, he's there to fight, and they have the clothing, the way they portray themselves, all the weapons, as he mentioned here briefly, in this case, as we bring here briefly, to fight. They were there for a fight. They were there for war. We cannot use a different word. I mean, that is what's happening. And we are saying this now because we want to set the tone that they were not dealing with just anybody. They were dealing with destructive minds. They were minds and hearts that unfortunately have not seen or have not opened themselves up yet to goodness as it's about to happen. So we listened to the entire provocation. Dr. Bezerra remained calm and concentrated, not showing any reaction, radiating vibrations of compassion extending beyond the room and towards the offender. Dr. Bezerra remained apparently unaffected by the challenge. So he was very calm. He knew what was going on, right? Dr. Bezerra asked us to concentrate deeply. This is really interesting. And he amplified our sight. Now, this is Mr. Miranda saying that their sight were amplified, so they were able to see a veritable army of strange beings advancing in battle formation. So this is, again, the group of people coming towards the Spiritist Center where they were located, with all the defense apparatus as well that was actually discussed on the last chapter. And he said he mentally asked Hermano to hold off the defenses at the entryway as the troops of the offense advanced at the rear in a ridiculously constructed chariot, somewhat ghostly and military at the same time, was the rabbi surrounded by a few of his most eminent commanders. So Bezerra de Menezes says, you know what, hold off. Let them come in. I know this is strange, folks, but hear me out, and we're gonna digest this a little bit together. But the idea here is like, okay, it looks like Bezerra de Menezes is not doing anything, or he's not going to do anything. He has no emotion whatsoever towards, no, but he's just calm. He's just, okay, let it happen. Something now is the moment that we're going to have to face this brother, who is acting completely as a war individual, but we need to help him somehow, and they have the knowledge of how to do so. We're not saying that we're supposed to act this or that way, but it's interesting how he reacts to it. The strategy is the following, and we're going to also later on kind of go back to the strategy, but look what this strategy is. His strategy was for a large number of his warriors to penetrate the defenses. In other words, to come into the spirit center. After which he and his chiefs would enter the battle with all their ferocity, as if they were still on the earth. Such was their complete delusion, right? Because they're thinking that, okay, now we're going to go in, we're going to penetrate, we're going to take care of the whole location. Well, not necessarily, because inside, look what's actually being done inside of the spirit center. So they have also their defense mechanism. The first group entered the conference hall, followed by the rabbi's cortege. At the moment, Dr. Bezerra gave Hermano the order to close off the entryway and reinforce the defenses, while the watchtowers cannons fired off a large quantity of darts that forced the rest of the invaders to retreat. So we mentioned this the last time, that there were the watchtowers, right? And from there were cannons that were actually emitting darts of energy that would paralyze those who were outside. And you may say, Leo, what is this? A war zone in the spirit realm? Once more, it's a defense mechanism. You should actually read the book so you don't think that it's the same thing that we're seeing in certain parts of the world in terms of war right now. These defense mechanisms only are used to make sure that these individuals are not penetrating, as they were trying to do, the spirit center. And this can happen, quite frankly, in any location that is of God. When I say is of God, meaning that they're doing something productive. It could be another church. It could be perhaps a synagogue. It could be actually a place where, a school, right, that is being protected in the spirit realm to make sure that negative spiritual forces are not entering. So the response is the following. Once again, we had falling to, this is the response of the rabbi and the group as well. Once again, we have fallen into a trap set by the miserable followers of the Lamb, just as has always happened throughout history. Let's get out of here right now. And this is actually him trying to retreat. And the conversation goes on. There was a rout in all directions, but no means of escape. The defenses were reinforced not only by defensive energy, but by a large number of Templars dressed in the manner of the days past and in a guardian position around the hall. They raised their hands, emitting vibrations of love, and in a hymn of praise to Christ Jesus, they begun to sing an exhortation of compassion and mercy. So you can only imagine, to deal with that situation, that invasion that they allowed, they had to pray so much. They had to change, not only prepare, but in the moment to help change the environment, they had to bring their forces together so that they would be able to deal with the saturated negative energy that came with those who wanted war. A shower of rain, drops of light illuminated by lofty spiritual fluids immediately began falling on the rebels, calming them down little by little. The dim subside, and as if anesthetized by the sublime energy, they dropped their grotesque primitive weapons and fell to the ground. A few were overcome with emotions of peace and began sobbing, while others remained silent and stupefied, almost insensitive but calm. Soon the only thing standing out was the strange apparatus carrying the rabbi and his commanders. He was ranting, feeling betrayed and belittled, as if he were an outcast and not the religious authority that attributed to himself himself qualifies as he qualifies himself, but he really did not have that quality. So here we have the strategy of bringing them together inside of the spirit center, because inside of the spirit center they would have all the capability to contain the negative thoughts that they brought with them, but they also had a large group of people in the spirit realm, as well as, well, I would say at this moment it was in the spirit realm only, because all even the workers of the house, they were brought in, as we saw, 2 o'clock in the morning to partake in this matter, right? So one can imagine, what were these people thinking when they woke up, right? They could be dreaming, oh, I thought I was in war. I thought I was in this amazing war of the past, right? Because they would have been able to see, some of them, if they were able to recollect, they would be able to see that these people were dressed like the old times, right? The Manuel Filomeno de Miranda also explains that they even brought animals, right? They were actually playing their I forget the name now, the instrument that would make a sound of war as well, and they did that several times at the beginning. So it's really interesting that all of these things would actually allow one to remember as if they were at war once they woke up, because the recollection would be pretty much a correlation to what we see here on Earth, right? So, for example, if they were to see certain weapons, they would connect to weapons that as we see here on Earth. All of these things is interesting for us to remember, because sometimes we wake up with these feelings that we were at this location, that this location was kind of strange, or perhaps I have been there before and we don't know why. But going back to the defense mechanism as well, as they entered, they have all of this work done, right? So how can we apply this in our lives? What if we are in a situation like this? What are the defense mechanisms that we have in our homes, in our hearts, when we are being attacked, right? When we are under the state of disturbance, right? Let's not even call war, hopefully not. But if we are being disturbed by a specific situation, excuse me, we need to pray. We need to make sure that we are connecting with higher minds, so we can neutralize the environment, and that would be for any situation whatsoever that is happening in our lives. So this is a beautiful mechanism that we don't say that this is wrong or not for them. With all the high statures of these spirits, this is perfect. But we also have to make sure that we don't want to just bring anybody in our homes. Okay, so it's just something that is nice to see and nice to be able for us to apply in our lives as we gain more maturity in our lives. Usually these are things that are done in the spirit center. In the spirit center, we always like to work as a group. That is the reason why that we need to ask for help, that we need to make sure that we are together with other people who are actually, in fact, with a mind and heart open to help others as well in situations like this. But let's continue with the conversation, right? Because now we get to see the conversation between Manuel Filomeno, Vieira de Menezes, as well with the rabbi. But there's something else. There is a surprise here that we're gonna bring, and it amazes all of us. Actually, let's see, 2 surprises, but let's go on. Dr. Vieira de Menezes, hallowed by a soft spiritual light that indicated his condition as a true apostle of Jesus, approached the furious invader and invited him to a fraternal dialogue. Why would I talk? And then he responds, the rabbi responds, why would I talk with the enemy? I came here to fight, not talk. My aim is to wipe out the infamous destroyers of the Jewish faith. They see themselves as possessors of the truth, having their Messiah a vagabond who threatened the hegemony of the Roman Empire and the doctrine of Moses, and who was justly crucified as the thief that he was. Our dazed excuse me, Dazzle visitors, perispirit showed significant deformations, and his red eyes emitted deadly rays of powerful energy, typical of the evil feature in demonic allegories. Once more, folks, we're only bringing here very, just parts of what was happening and what Manuel P. Miranda was actually bringing to us in terms of his condition and the conditions of the group as well. Because there is more to read to this, but we're going to focus on the positive. As he spoke, he radiated dark waves that dissipated on contact with the continuous rain of luminous spiritual fluids filling the place. Dr. Bezerra did not react negatively, but responded, "I am not the one who is going to parley with you, my friend, for I am fully aware of my own smallness and lack of merit for what is a highly significant time for many of us. Let us wait for a more authoritative voice, one that will come to us on behalf of him whom you so vehemently reject." This is the moment, folks. This is the moment. So Dr. Bezerra Menezes is not talking to him. He say, "Look," and I'm going to put this back here because he recognizes the the how peculiar this moment is, not only for the rabbi, but for all of us, for humanity. And he says, "I need to step back. I have no way to go ahead and take care of the situation by myself." He had the group that was working with him, right, the Spirit Center. But beyond that, he needs more help. And here's the first surprise that we get. St. Francis of Assisi comes and talks to the Spirit. Let's go to the text and see what it said. The surrounding light intensified, and the magnificent spirit of Francis of Assisi descended to our group, dressed in a humble medieval habit and radiating a special luminosity. As you can see here, everything is kept to its nature. When I say this, it's because the rabbi was dressed for war. They had all the apparatus and everything. And we see that even St. Francis of Assisi comes down and doesn't show off. He shows himself as we ought to be, as a brother, as a sister. So there's a lot of things here that we need to, that's why we say, read the book, please read the book. So he comes as a brother. He comes as someone truly representing Christ. And it's beautiful, the things that he will say. Hopefully it will touch your heart as well. So we kept here so we can share with one another. He was escorted by some of his former companions. Together they constituted a small courage of high order spirits whom Jesus' love had sent to those gloomy surroundings characterized by wretches, crushed by suffering grief, disguised as madness and as yearning for revenge. Preserving the distance that was automatically established, the sublime visitor stretched forth his hand, accustomed to charity and mercy, and with an unforgettable voice, he said to the rabbi, "The doctrine that human beings have followed is not his," in terms of, Jesus, "but one of human passions. He who blessed the cross of shame, rendering it the angelic wings of liberations, would never agree with any attitude that would damage his postulates of indiscriminate love, especially for us Gentiles, because his own people did not want to receive or accept him. To demonstrate his mercy, he offered his helping hands to the woman living in error, the adulteress condemned by the law, and the lepers of body and soul. He even met with members of the Sanhedrin who came to him in the silence of the night, as well as the powerful of the world who needed him. Without a trace of vainglory, he became the way of redemption of all who have had enough of the world and its illusions, supporting them with tenderness and affection. And to you also, brother Rabbi, he is offering his hand marked by the nails of the cross applied by the Sanhedrin, which imposed it on Roman ruler, praying for forgiveness for those who martyred him in times of ignorance in the distant past. So we see here, and we're going to give a continuation to this, we see here that he's not talking about himself, even though he will get to that point, but he brings the master first and the things that the master has brought to us, and we distort it. right? No wonder the rabbi is feeling this way, because we use all that we learned from the master, and we completely disregard it, or we changed, and we imposed on others as well. Because if the rabbi is feeling this way, as he had mentioned, that he did not come to parlay or to converse, but to fight, was because he was imposed something onto himself that he did not want to follow it, right? And this is again way after our master Jesus, and we come and we do the same thing, imposing on others, right? But we're going to talk more about that later on, because he was a victim, but also he was also someone, he imposed things on others. But we'll see that later on. Let's stick with what St. Francis of Assisi has to say to us here. Not measuring distances, nor fearing the wrongful reaction of earthly rulers, he is above all governments and presumptuous authorities. He asks that all evolve towards him, for he is waiting for us with a light burden and an easy yoke. This is the moment of liberation sounding for you, dear brother, as you have been deceived by human pride and the mistaken notion that you are a ruler, although unable to master your own passions. What a beautiful thing. The mistaken notion that you are a ruler, although unable to master your own passions. Postponing the opportunity would be to write a chapter in your unfortunate experience for many centuries to come. And then this is interesting. Even Brother Wolf and Sister Birds yielded to his voice when I had the chance to encounter them. So it will not be you, brother, rabbi, knower of the spiritual laws, someone who thinks and loves, who will refuse to receive him right now. I understand your pain, because I also once found myself faced with the alternative: God or the world. My own father told me, the bishop of the city, that I was a demented, rebellious, and spendthrift son who was always causing him financial harm because I had sided with the poor. At that decisive moment, like a flash, I heard Jesus asking, "Who are my father, my mother, and my brothers, but those who do God's will?" And I decided to be his lesser brother. I renounced I renounced wealth and my father's support, stripping myself of everything that belonged to him, and donned a robe taken from the trash. Whatever belongs to the world remains in the world. Whatever follows us after death is what belongs to us, to God, and what comes from him. So do not kick against the gods, and hold on to the perverse attitudes of those who mistreated you, deluded by the lying world. They were false representatives of Jesus. So I want to stop right here, and I know it's a lot for us to comprehend at the same time, and I'll keep the task that as we're saying this. He brings Jesus, he brings himself as an example, not to exalt himself, but to really show to this rabbi, to this brother, that there is a way. And the representation of Christ's teachings was completely distorted, right? By these false representatives of the master. So it's really interesting how he dives into this consideration of what the master have done and what he has done as well. And he even brings his capabilities of also taming nature, right? When he talks about the brother wolf, he talks about the birds as well. That is said in many in literatures that Saint Francis of Assisi had this capability of taming nature in such a way, or I don't want to say controlling, but living with nature in such a harmonious way that really escapes our capabilities right now. I mean, it's hard to even understand. In this case of the wolf, how he was able to tame the wolf that was actually killing people in where he lived and everything, and he was able to actually take care of the situation. So there are these beautiful examples of life that we come in contact with, and it's also displayed in the book, saying, look, God has created so much beauty, and we're gonna see here, and here we are fighting for something that is so lame, right? That is destructive. Well, we're fighting for destruction, to have more power. right? So this is the second surprise that we have, right? Beyond now the Master Saint Francis of Assisi. He says, however, before he reached the door, a cone of magnificent light came down from the infinite and enveloped the wretch, who felt a jolt going through him while an incomparable, beautiful voice asked him. I'm gonna stop right there because yes, he tries to leave. The rabbis tries to escape the whole thing, and even though the war, it was open for him to leave, right? Because the Saint Francis of Assisi then turns and say, "You can leave. I'm going to do the same thing that Jesus did." What would that be? We're not here to force you to stay. We're not here to do anything that is against your will, but there is more, right? He resorts, and this is how it gets better for us to analyze the power that some of us have on others. He resorts to a decisive being that came and helped as well to turn the situation around. Where are you going, my son? What have you done to yourself? There is only one way forward, the way of love. At the same time, a lovely spirit condensed into human form. She advanced towards him from the outer side and stretched out her arms, asking, Eliakim, my son, how long have we been apart? I have come in search of you because there is no heaven for a mother who is suffering in the flames of unhappiness. Do not compromise your fate any longer. It's me, your mother, Sarah. I was martyred alongside you, but I forgave those who tried unsuccessfully to destroy us. The impetuous rabbi stopped short, dumbfounded at the unusual spiritual event, and unable to resist the energy coming from his mother's spirit, he fell to his knees, howling in wild pain that tore at his insides. "O mother," he said, "I'm just a miserable wretch forgotten by Adonai." He'd managed to say in unspeakable anguish, "No one loves me. Have hatred, excuse me, and I have hatred. I have hatred as my liquor of choice. I get drunk on it more and more, waiting for annihilation." "My dear," she said to him. The noble lady approached the wretch and wrapped him in indescribable tenderness, hugging him as he knelt by his side, as only mothers can do. And then Brother Joy came, in this case, our San Francis of Assisi, approached them with tears streaming down his face and completed the unforgettable scene, saying gently, "Yes, you have just begun to live in true freedom. Take advantage of it. This is Jesus' answer to your pleas, showing how much he loves you." So, one would think, right? Okay, you know, San Francis of Assisi is enough. We all, all that he brought to the rabbi is enough. It wasn't, because he was still trying to flee the location, to leave the location and go his ways, go back to what he was doing. But it took this powerful love that is perhaps second to what Jesus has brought to us in terms of love that God has for us, right? Again, second. And perhaps some of us may not agree to this, because sometimes the connection that we have with our parents is not the most straight, the most beautiful one. But one thing that we like to remind ourselves: they give us life, and that for itself is amazing. And Jesus himself tells us what? Honor thy father, honor thy mother, right? As we also learn in the commandments. But we are always reminded every day to do so. And it is this love that then breaks down this feeling of hatred that the rabbi has inside of him, right? And this connection. But that only happens because all the work was done by the Spirit at the center. All the work was done by Bezerra de Menezes, as well as the combination of the fluids that came from some Francis of Assisi, and then knowing what was going to happen. I'm quite sure, and we're going to see this a little bit later, that there was a connection with the mother, a preparation with the mother to also help in this case, if there was a need to, and there was, because he was trying to leave. So it's a beautiful moment for all of us to dive into it, really, to really read the chapter and thinking, oh my God, what a beautiful moment. Does that only happens at a spirit center? Does that only happens at a specific location with higher minds? Well, we would like to say yes, but we can also be part of this. We can also be part of this transformation, the transformational moment, right? And it can happen not in the magnitude that we see here, but in small increments that will lead into something greater, or perhaps that will lead us into a position where we don't have to have such a high intervention for us to live well. If you understand what I'm saying, why get to this point where we have so much anguish in our hearts, where we can actually do the small things of life, so that we don't get to this point that we don't have to have this intervention, and we could be using our energy in such a way that perhaps we don't get there. I hope you understand, and hope you also look at this as an opportunity for all of us to change, perhaps even on how we position ourselves towards other faiths, towards other religions as well, and other ways of life, and have respect. As you do have respect, we demand our respect as well, in a eloquent and intelligent way, right? So this is chapter 10, folks, and then we move on to chapter 11. I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to try to go as quick as I can, but to make sense as well, because chapter 11 is as beautiful as chapter 10, but it's important for us to really understand that the reading, the breaking down into parts is important, because sometimes you may be thinking about A and then you just jump into B, but you're not really digesting what Manuel Filomeno de Miranda is saying. In this case, that is why we're kind of breaking down into certain segments or certain ideas, so we can pick up the hints here and there. And I'm quite sure if you read it, you would bring more information as well, that we cannot bring fully into an hour 15 minutes or so. So, what were the feelings towards the work, right? This is something that Mr. Miranda also brings to us. All of us were jubilant. We could not remember anything like it on our evolutionary journey. The chords of the love sang tenderly within us as we experienced an unprecedented elation. In a different state of mind, the rabbi's followers outside were clamoring for his release, threatening to lay siege to the institution for as long as it took. So it's important for us to think here that those who were did not know what was happening, those outside that did not know what was happening inside, they're still in that war zone moment or mindset, right? They were like, okay, what is our leader here? And they're claiming for more destructive ideals. Assistance to his companions inside continue in the atmosphere of kindness. Some were taken away, others were released, fleeing, the building to join those outside. Visibly touched by all that had happened, Anacleto approached Dr. Vieira and thanked him for his extraordinary assistance. Anacleto is actually the director of the Spirit Center, if you don't remember. And let's go back to the explanation of the strategy. Here's a beautiful thing, right? That we want to bring over here. And we're going to talk a little bit about the aftermath of what happened to the rabbi afterwards as well. Manuel Filomeno Miranda obviously is like, okay, puzzled. Okay, what happened? I mean, how was this all played out? As soon as possible, I asked Dr. Bezerra about St. Francis' decision to open the exit doors for the rebel. Because remember, even though we didn't bring the text here, the rabbi wanted to leave, and St. Francis of Assisi said, okay, you want to leave? The door's open. It's up to you, right? But then the mother comes and helps. And the following is explained. Our blessed one knew that the mother of the spiritually ill rabbi was on her way, and that with the power of love and kindness she would get through to him during the difficult ordeal. cultivating a destructive sentiment like hate for nearly 5 centuries condenses to such an extent in the core of the spirit that no words can dilute it. It takes the irrepressible power of unlimited love to alter his consolidated energy. At that moment, rather than explanations and discussions, something crucial was required that would shock him with a surprise and enchantment in such a way that he would lose control over his reasoning and the infamous purposes he had cherished for so long. So once more, folks, words wouldn't change anything. Action, yes, right? But there was no time for to bring the actions or exemplify anything. So they had to have this powerful love as the mother of the rabbi to come down and say, enough is enough. You have now the chance to do something better of your life, right? Do not fall into the same pit again. And here I am to help you. And that was the only thing possible for him to change. It's such a beautiful, and we can call it strategy because it is exemplified on the book as a strategy. That it's we have to also think if you are in a position that you want to help or you want to do something productive of your life, we have to have strategies. We have to strategize a way. Yes, no matter what we do, we're going to find hurdles. We're going to find setbacks, but we have to stay strong in our strategies that we put in our lives, right? Much like when we start our year, we have that New Year resolution. Put on the plan, stick to it, and get it done, right? Move on. If anything happens, just try it again and keep moving on. That doesn't mean we don't go back and we don't analyze our strategy. Any company nowadays, anything that it is done in an institution, before they execute something, they need to strategize how it's going to be done, the resources, the people that is going to be used, and it should be no different in our lives as well, right? Not to say that everything will be perfect, but because at the end of the day, the rabbi would have his final saying as well, but he chose to stay with his mother, to stay at the location that he was going to be helped. And that's where we go back and then we see we continue to see what was done. Wrapped in the vibration of universal love, the words of the imitator of Jesus were aimed at creating an emotional arena for the happy reunion. None of us possesses the sublime power that he attained through selflessness and the perfect imitation of Jesus. Only those who are able to love indiscriminately can change the unfortunate course of someone who has surrounded, I lost myself here, so has surrounded to folly and dissipation. St. Francis knew that the rebel could not actually leave the building, since from the moment he first entered the room, he began to benefit from the surrounding psychosphere, thus gradually releasing the constructive, unhealthy layers that asphyxiated him and to which he had adapted. After having been blessed by the light, the human being can never choose the darkness. And this is him saying, Bezerra de Menezes is saying to all of us, right? So what happens to him now, one might ask, right? What happens to the rabbi now? Well, there's a lot of things that's going to happen. Number one, he's going to be helped by the treatment that will be applied, that will be offered and applied at the Spirit Center, at the location where he was in the spirit realm, right? He's going to also have to work with those whom he had hurt in the past. All of the followers that he had, right? And we like to include here the followers in all senses of the word. I would like to say discarnated one, incarnated one, those who are following him directly, and those who are following him indirectly as well. Sometimes we start, in our daily lives, we start to construct ideas that perhaps is not necessarily something that we would like to do, to persecute, as we said earlier, a specific group of people, a specific religion. But the reason that happens because sometimes we open with mundane ideas. We open ourselves with these thoughts, and guess what? We start being influenced by these minds. that are working with us because we connect with these minds, and we start working for them indirectly. Much like if we are working for a company, if we buy their product. When I say working for a company, or accepting the product that a company, even though they are doing wrong things, we still buy their product, right? We say no, this company is not a good company because they're using, let's say, cheap labor to make their products. And yes, I mean, this is a completely different ideal here, but we're just trying to make sure that how we associate it with these minds, because it's very easy for us to say, no, I never thought about this, would never do this. Yeah, of course not to this extent, but we multiply energies when we think adversely about other people, other groups of people, other ideals that perhaps it may not be the best thing of the world, but we need to respect and we need to help. We need to extend a hand in order for them to change as well. If we think that we're so good, let us do as some friends of Assisi did. Mirror, or try to at least to mirror God, Jesus' examples. So for us to really dive into the idea of the recovery, he says, as soon as possible, he will endeavor to free the hundreds of cohorts he deceived and forced to live in the infernal region where he was hiding out. He will contribute to changing the behavior of all of them, victims of their own and his insanity. Look at this: victims of their own and his insanity. So these minds, even though they were obsessed by the rabbi, right, or by that ideal, they also have their openings. It's important for us to bring this responsibility here, because we also have a level of responsibility when we fall prey of these thoughts, these feelings, right? These obsessions, right? He will be shown that the persecution and infamous death he suffered are rooted in days long past, when, together with Elijah, look at this, he put the worshippers of Baal to the sword with unparalleled cruelty and rage on the banks of the Kishon River. Here, let me finish this two paragraph here, and we're going to come back to this. Many of the victims of the Inquisitions bore the vestiges of that ancient massacre inscribed within their being, because they had cruelly assailed worshippers of the pagan god, as if a moral wrong could be redressed through the criminal behavior of those who say they are responsible for the destiny of others. Nothing happens without being connected with previous events. Ultimately, every victim is a recovering tormentor because before the divine codes. Let's stop right here, because this needs to really make sense for us, right? This man, the rabbi, and I said men because we're here with us on planet Earth, even though in this spirit realm, he was an individual at the time, together, as it says here, with Elijah. He persecuted those worshippers of the Baal. We're not going to get into the details of the Baal but the Baal was by the pagans, was actually a god of fertility, and those who actually followed Baal was actually partaking in a very misleading sexual ideals, right? Because they, again, it was a god of fertility, and they were doing things that were not sane, let's put it that way. And we, again, put that aside. If you want to read more about it, please do so. But he was the one to say, no, this is not going to happen. His ideal of stopping madness was great, because what they were doing was not like of a family content, if we can say that way. Much like today, if we were to say no to pornography, no to things that are not helpful in our lives, right? Especially if you want to live a family life, or construct something for your family and for your surroundings as well, right? So you say no to pornography, and he was doing the same way. But the way he did was how he actually brought a lot of people to death because of that, right? And then the madness doesn't stop there. The madness goes on later on, many years after, in the different moments of Inquisition. So you think that, okay, now this is just going to stop. Okay, now he killed a bunch of people. He's going to be fine. No. So we see that the energy that he was putting into living a righteous life was not um, well applied, right? The energy was going to the right location, but the way it was applied was actually wrong, and he is still living the consequences of it until now, when he's given the ability to say, "No, it doesn't work that way. You are actually putting your energy in the right things, however, the wrong way," right? Well, let's say he was putting on the wrong way now too, to the wrong things as well. But he is trying to rescue something that he has been living for many centuries. So it's important for us to analyze this, not to say that it justifies what he's doing now, but to look at it and say there is a past. And as Bezerra de Menezes is saying here, ultimately, every victim is a recovering tormentor before the divine codes. We're not different. Our past is no different. Our present represents no difference whatsoever. And if we don't do anything about it, guess what? Our future will be quite the same. So this is the alert. This is the awareness that we can get from this part of the book as well, because we're not just any victim, right? We are the victims, but there is a past. Here's another thing that we would like to highlight for you: the environment after the event. So what happens after the event, in an encounter like this, in a rescue moment like this, right? What happens? I'll ask for you, what happens after a party at your home? What needs to be done? And I'm not using the analogy in a negative way. Please don't think that way. But after we actually have a party, we have a connection of any sort. Well, I'll give you a better example. Yesterday, I had to actually go to the emergency room with a loved one. And at the emergency room, you see all kinds of things. We're still living in a pandemic mode right now, and we go through certain situations that it's like, you know what? Now I need to take care of myself. Going to the hospital, going to the emergency room, is no different, and it can be very destructive to all of us, right? It can be very unfortunate to all of us who are in that position. So coming back home, after we came back home, we had to take measures where put everything to wash, make sure that you sterilize everything, or everything that you touched, everything that you took with you, you need to make sure that you clean it so that you're not contaminating the house if there was some case of contamination while you were at that location, right? The same thing we will see that Manuel P de Miranda brings to us, as well as Bezerra de Menezes tells the people at the Spirit Center to sterilize the location as well, so that the work can continue at the Spirit Center. With the area of roundabout, the center nearly empty of the members of the host of evil, I observed the density of the unhealthy psychosphere and the countless thought forms hovering where they had been a short time ago. Their coarse physical emanations, emotional sterilizations, have given way to a dark, still containing the exclamation of hatred, the groans, and the aberrations that typified such hosts. Under the guise of Bezerra de Menezes, specialists in ambient hygiene, this is amazing, ambient hygiene begun using devices to cleanse not only the air but the ground, which had become contaminated with harmful idioplasmic fixations. The work of preserving the environment is highly important for spiritual activities that have to operate within it. In order for activities involving fluid and energy therapy conducted under special conditions to attain the desired success, they are subjected to many conditions and circumstances, including local hygiene. That is why precautions are taken so that mediumistic meetings involving healing, fraternal counseling, and assistance take place in rooms reserved for such endeavors in light of the defensive and sterilizing measures necessary to free them from the psychic miasmas of patients from both planes who flock there to help for help. Once more, folks, why we're bringing this here? Cleanness, hygiene is of the utmost necessary, of necessity for all of us. The physical, and most importantly, or we say as important as the spiritual as well. What are we talking about here? If we have an encounter with a situation like the example that I brought here, not that the hospital is a bad thing, the hospital is a great thing, but contaminations can happen. If we have a negative thought, if we're watching things, if that is not positive, if we come across someone that we feel that is not doing well, guess what? It's important for us to really stop, pray, change the environment, ask for help, do some physical cleaning too, because the words impregnates the physical environment. Feelings impregnates the environment, the physical environment as well. So it's important for us to make sure that cleanness is should be done in our lives, right? Organization, right? I was actually watching a video the other day of someone talking about, would you actually put a shirt that is not well pressed or inside out, right? We wouldn't. It does not make an even, and even when you put it on, right? Sometimes you may come across, or you may have come across a situation that you have to wear something that was not well pressed or was not well cleaned, whatever, and or perhaps if you put a shirt that is inside out, it feels weird. It's not that it's not something that we would think. At least when you're young people, sometimes they do that. They think it's cool, but when you gain a certain maturity in life, you're like, no, this doesn't feel right. This is not correct. No matter what you're wearing, you feel that is, and it's the same thing in our lives. We should elevate ourselves to this hygiene, physical and spiritual hygiene, to a level that will allow us to connect with these higher minds. If you're doing this in the Spiritist Center to maintain the order, guess what? We ought to aim to the same level as well. So, very important point that Manuel Filomena brings to us. Let's move on so we can conclude this and finalize this chapter. And I have another. This is going to be the Leo's surprise here from chapter 10 that we didn't talk about it. If you read it, you know what I'm saying here, how it ends on chapter 10. But Manuel Filomena Miranda also talks about Anacleto's recovery. This is the friend that actually had done something wrong. Actually, after his wife discarnated, he started engaging on certain not so good ideals, and he actually done something to the Spiritist Center that was very destructive to himself and to the Spiritist Center. He was also one of the individuals that allowed himself or opened the door to be affected by these destructive minds that was commended by Eliakim as well. And he was in this state of recovery, right? So Manuel Filomena Miranda brings that he was actually being helped as well. Moreover, feeling much better that morning, that on previous days, Anacleto met with the center's president for an uplifting conversation, which I was allowed to listen in on. The two met in a private parlor, where the formerly troubled Anacleto confessed to his friend and fellow worker in the Spirit's endeavor what had happened to him recently. I have, and this is Anacleto saying, I have had curious, strange dreams, he said, trying to recap his memories. In the matters that gripped me, when I became the moral breach for evil to get in, he even says himself, I became the moral breach for evil to get in. I stole money from the center, which I will refund from our center, which I will refund at the first opportunity. I'm counting on your benevolence and compassion in my need for support and the opportunity to recover. I have come here to hand in my resignation to the board so that my illness will no longer impede the work for the good, which is characteristic of our institution. Sincerity, and then his friend said, the president of the Spiritist Center said, sincerity is the seal that precedes any reparation. the courage to face one's error and resume a healthy conduct. You, my brother, have never been worthier to continue in your position than you are today. We all deceive ourselves, and we have the right to start afresh, to find the best way to recover. I'm asking you to remain at our side, helping us and helping yourself. Our co workers have been worried about your behavior. I will tell them about our meeting, but without going to details. Everyone will give you the vote of confidence you deserve so that together we may follow the pathway of Jesus to the final moment. And then he explains, please, continue with the passes, help yourself, help us. And it's interesting that the mentor of the Spiritist Center was actually guiding the president so that he would actually, allow this brother to continue after he came to his senses and said, I made a huge mistake. Please help me. And he was actually bringing his resignation as well to the board, but he's asked to stay. So it's a beautiful moment for us, in terms of forgiveness, in terms of also understanding that we are not perfect. And sometimes we need to take a step back and say, I'm sorry for what I have done, right? Asking for forgiveness. Forgiving sometimes it can be a little bit easy, but even asking for some of us may not be that easy, right? But then again, something interesting happened. The final disconnection. I will touch back on the one element that we have talked about in the past two sessions. In the first session, that we all learned how Anacleto was actually connected with the ovoids, right? With these other spirits that are so dense, right? In his vital center, connected through his vital centers. We see that they were able to disconnect several of them, but one specific one from the if I'm not mistaken, the crown chakra, right? And we talked about this on session 5. Please go back and read through it and watch it as well. That was addressed. That Dr. Bezerra Menezes explains that they couldn't do so because there was this symbiosis going on, number one, and it is something that needs to happen in the future, and it happens right now. Why? Let's find out. During the course of the meeting and the effect of the change in Anacleto's mental focus, the void magnetized to his crown chakra, I was right, became more agitated, emitting inarticulate sounds expressing anger and aggression. As the conversations proceeded down the path of peace and moral health, and Anacleto's thinking turned fully to the good, the suction-like tube that kept the void connected loosened and unraveled, causing the void to fall to the floor. It disconnected by itself. There was a disconnection by itself. There was nothing need to be done because, again, he changed the way he perceived the world, what was happening, what he had done. He asked for forgiveness, and then the disconnection with the negative ovoid or the unfortunate void actually just happened naturally. And then there is more explanation, which is beautiful. As if he had been waiting for that to happen, Dr. Bezerra picked up with his own hands and spoke to it softly. We may think that it's like an animal or something or some kind of... No, this is a spirit that is connected in a form of ovoid that is so heavy in terms of negative thoughts and negative feelings that it's a mind that is a little... Let us think of a little child or something small that they can pick up and say, okay, now you will be helped as well. Sleep now, my brother, and rest. You are weary and have suffered too much to continue this inglorious battle. There are new days of hope, and you need inner harmony to choose the way forward as soon as you are free of this painful injunction. Never doubt the love of our Father. He never forsakes us. You are in this condition by your own free choice. Life's invitation to harmony and happiness everywhere. But unfortunately, human beings frivolously choose the lubricous pleasure of just one moment to the detriment of lasting joy, won by effort and sometimes sacrifice, which is very well compensated. Now Anacleto will find it much easier to self-overcome since he has resolved to change his behavior. His attunement and his mental vibratory fields have become altered, thus releasing him from the avenger who had filled his mind with outrageous ideals in their lengthy hypnotic exchange. Spirit related obsession begin to loosen their construction on patients when the latter resolve to change the mental landscape that harbors spirit parasites, sustaining them by means of their energetic tonus. That is why we did not free Anacletus from this last exploiter, but favor him with freedom of psychotherapeutic choice derived from his own will. What would have been his merit by disconnecting this spirit? And I'll leave this question to you because they also doesn't they Dr. Bezerra Menezes doesn't say directly, but he insinuates this question by bringing the explanation, further explanations down to why they did it this way. It is true. What is our merit if they, all the spirits, all our mentors, comes and they do the work for us? We have to also, we will have help, but we also have to help ourselves. If we want to make something of ourselves, we have to give the kickstart. We have to show effort, right? In every sense of the word, in every situation, whether that is for completing something physically in our lives or completing something spiritually, whatever, that we have to put ourselves in that position. So it's important for us to connect with this, right? The 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 surprise that I have for you is the following. I'm not going to put on the screen yet because I would like to finish with this. There is much more to this chapter, chapter 11, because he also gives an update on the young lady that we study on previous chapter that was actually being obsessed by her quote unquote partner that was exploiting her, and who was actually pregnant of her mother, of the past, of the previous, well, her mother of that same lifetime, who had discarnated, and she was actually having thought of aborting the pregnancy, and she, by watching the the talk that was actually going on at the Spiritist Center, she actually decided to move on with the pregnancy that she had, the baby that she had with us, and with her, as she changed her mind as well, her mother, who was actually with her in spirit, that she was carrying, that was about to reincarnate, also feels the joy that she confirms with thoughts and feelings that she was going to go on, despite all the difficulties that she would have to face as being a single parent, right, a single mother, to take care of the baby. And they show this joy between the two of them. It's really interesting to how the chapter finalizes. As interesting as what I would like to bring to you here, so we can finalize and we can dive into our questions and comments, that is a prayer that the mother of Eliakim Sadoc actually prays at the end, giving thanks for the opportunity to come and help her son, and giving thanks to as well to Saint Francis of Assisi. And I would like to utilize that for us to quiet our minds and really digest these teachings. She says the following: Lord of Israel and all nations, of all nations, may you always be praised for the greatness of your love, the mercy of your forgiveness, and your compassion towards your wayward children. Your greatness cannot be measured, nor can your laws of justice be fully understood. We submit our always in complete trust to your designs, for they lead us to plenitude. Out of your mercy and compassion, receive the prodigal son back into your bosom. From all of us who love you, our perennial gratitude. Small, very effective. And we would like to dedicate this to one another as whenever we err, whenever we do something wrong, and then we do come to our senses, as the prodigal son saying, I'm sorry, here I am again to be next to you, Master Jesus, dear God. please accept us back, right? So leaving this for all of you to really think about it and connect with us. I would like to open up for questions and comments as well. One thing that so we don't spend more time and having to come back. Danny, if I can go ahead and just show this real quick. Um, Next a session, the session 7, I promise I'll have 7 on the bottom too. We will study the struggles subside and collective assistance. That will be chapter 12 and chapter 13. So thank you guys, and I'll bring pass the word to Kirsten to share what we have in our comments and everything.
Whew, what a chapter, Leo. Lots of
So
things
what?
to discuss and reflect on. But let's go ahead and jump right into some of our questions. I'm going to jump right over to Yasko. And she says, "Hi, Leo, chapter 10. Interesting. The attention to the details of choreography, Templars, cannons, etc. of that time. Why would all this be set for? The center would also appear to them as part of the battlefield to attract and then to trap some inside the center for the treatment."
So Yasko, let me see if I understand this. You're asking the Templars, canons, and etc. Why would this be set for? The center would also appear to then. Yes, I think what you're trying to say. Why the past like scenario that was described, right? The number one is in terms of the spirit center, the the work that was done to prevent the attack, it is described for us just like much, watchtowers and as it happens, right? To tell you the truth, the nature of it, I don't think it is, well explained in terms of the details, right? But we have to understand as well that I believe that these minds, because they were vibrating as if they were in the past, because the way they were thinking, the watchtowers would have been constructed with like brick like looking type of construction, right? Because they want to also impress in terms of, okay, this is how we're going to respond. Did they would they know that the darts that were being sent was not to kill them, or that is, if it was the same way in the past? No, probably they didn't. All that they could do is to react, because the nature of these minds is of reaction. They don't think. They want to attack, right? But in a reactive mode. In terms of the rabbi and his group, the reason they were showing themselves in such a way is because that's how they vibrated. That's how they were vibrating. Still, they didn't know any better. They did not allow themselves to change any better. Much like if you were compare a battle in the spirit realm right now, from for example, from our the wars here on earth. If the spirit is connected, for example, the certain wars here in US that happen in US, they would be also portraying themselves the same way, because their thoughts, their feelings are vibrating the same way in the same instance. They're going to present themselves that way, and perhaps the remedy that needs to be applied to them, it has to be of the same level, so that it doesn't create even much more disconnect, if you will. But the preventive and the measures that were taken by the spirit the center all were of a good nature, really, to minimize as much as possible the negative thoughts and negative feelings, to neutralize what they were going through, so they can be permeated with the new that there was actually being proposed to them. Not only what St. Francis of Assisi does, but also the shock that they explain that came from the mother. I hope that explains. I believe that's what you're asking.
I think so too, yeah. Our next question comes to us from Paula Schmidt. Paula says, "How would you explain being spiritually ill?"
Wow. I don't know. Because illness can be of all sorts. Illness can be in different degrees, right? And I think it's, if we even take a step further down and say spiritual, we add the spiritual ideal there, it's even more broad, right? But one thing that I would like to resort to um, is to what Bezerra de Menezes says. Well, Saint Francis of Assisi says, right, in this book again, that Jesus says the following: "Who is my brother? Who is my mother? Who is my father?" So on and so forth, right? And then the answer is those who are actually acting with God, doing what God is allowing us to do to be a good individual, is those are the my family members. So spiritual illness is anything that goes against that. Spiritual illness to me, in this context right here that we're studying, is anything that is against or the natural laws. And one may say that, but Leo, we don't, we're not wise enough, we're not intelligent enough morally and spiritually, and even with the technology that we have, we're not wise enough. I understand, but with again spiritism telling us that the essence inside of us, that when I do something wrong towards my brother, if I am capable enough to apply that towards me, the consequences of my actions towards me to a certain degree, we will be able to see that we're acting, that we're spiritually ill, right? And that puts us in a good position, because it's not the other anymore that is spiritually ill. Am I spiritually ill, right? Am I doing something that is against God's law, that is inside of our conscience? So I would like to stop at that, because the more we say, the more we can go on. But that would be the idea of spiritual illness right now, that we can have with these teachings over here. But then again, um, I would love to sit down to have this conversation as a group and with you included, so we can so I can hear from you as well what you think. So thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Paula actually had an additional question.
Okay.
She said, "How would you incorporate the self-identification of rebelliousness as being the root of personal suffering when counseling someone?"
All right. How would you incorporate the self-identification of rebelliousness as being the root of personal suffering when counseling someone? I think we need to identify, right, first of all, that if we're being rebellious about something, it's because that is still inside of us. And the at that point that we're helping someone, not to point fingers, but to allow the person to see within themselves, that they're being rebellious against something that perhaps they still have inside of them. There are two instances that happened to not Divaldo, can't
Raul?
remember. Raul. Yeah, thank you. Raul. There were two instances that I remember that he explained to us that happened to him. One, I'll try to be brief here, that he was actually watching the news, and he was very upset about what was showing in the news in terms of politicians. Since we're talking about politicians, all the time now, social media and all these things, it's good that we exemplify this here. And he started feeling this rage, this, against what was happening and all those things. And then his spiritual mentor came to him and say, "Why are you doing this? Why are you, throwing darts?" And then he said, "Don't you see what's happening?" He's like, "Well, if you feel that way, it's because you still have that inside of you." Yes, he was trying to show that, I don't agree with this anymore, but that was inside that rage was still inside of him, right? And the other incident that I want to bring to it as well is that one time he went to a group of people in Europe, if I can remember, to give a talk. And when he got into the place, he actually, a lot of people were smoking, right? And mind you, these people were not spiritists. The group of people that he was going to talk to, they were not spiritists. And not to say that spiritists don't smoke or they shouldn't smoke, I'm not saying that, but just to say that these individuals were not, thinking, they were not there to really understand or living their lives to fully to spiritism. And they were smoking, and there was like this smog, fog in the air. And he's like, "I'm gonna talk here," and he almost turned around and did not speak to that group of people. And then he forced himself, with the help of his mentor, to say, "Who are you? Who are you to think such a thing, right? So going back to the question, how do we incorporate this? It's number one for us to see, the why are we rebellious about a specific situation, why that triggers something inside of us. It's because we have it still inside of us. It's not easy to do such a thing. And then if it happens to someone and we identify it, quite frankly, it's much easier for us to identify the error of others than to ourselves than when we do to ourselves. But to show that individual, why do you think that is? What triggers this on you, right? And allow the person to dive into it. The answer may not come right away, but the person then will realize that, you know what, it's not for me to go ahead and judge, or to say that it has to be done this or that way. Many times we are connected with those situations. That's why we're coming back to readdress it. Guess what? Here we are, readdressing things of the past that perhaps, like the rabbi was now showing as a victim, but he did some things in the past as well that was not so well, even though he was trying to conserve, or being conservative, or being someone who really praised God in his life, but he took the life of others. So there are consequences to that as well. So I hope that answers the question. And again, I'm open for discussion and suggestions in the future too.
Okay, thank Leo. I mean, there's probably could go on and ask so many millions of questions. There's so many things that come across our mind, and we have other comments and questions, but just wanting to be cognizant of the time. I'm just gonna slip in my own question real quick, because I'm curious your thoughts on this after reading this chapter. And I think Yasko kind of touched on it a little bit, which she mentioned about the Templars. So whenever I hear the word Templars, I think of Templar Knights. So is that what they were referring to in terms of I guess how they were presenting themselves, like the Templar Knight uniforms?
Mhm. Yes, exactly. And that is actually well explained, if I'm not mistaken, chapter 8 and 9, or 8 or 9. I can't remember. I think it was 9, because they were the ones that were actually summoned to create the towers as well. And if you read about the Templars, I mean, it's like I went in not into details, but I actually studied a little bit of them. They were very intelligent, very wealthy, and a lot of the banking ideals as well that we have in the world today actually came from the Templars. And there is a huge thing that happened, but we're not going to go into here. But why are these spirits being summoned to do the work that they're doing? I think the beauty of all of this is that the preservation of culture is an amazing thing when it's used for the right purpose to help, right? Because we can say it's being used for the right purpose, but in a negative way, right? Because people believe all sorts of things, but in the right way. So they were summoned in their ways. They're great what they do. I'll give an example. There are a lot of groups of people, that do certain things in our day-to-day lives right now. If you want to build something in your home, who are you going to call, right? A specific group of people. If you want to do something that that requires the feminine touch, you're going to hire women. So I'm bringing this here because the preservation of culture, the preservation of the past in such a way that it was done they utilized then their characteristics in such a way that is so good that is still up to today. They're presenting themselves the same way because it will help with the situation, right? But also allow them to be themselves. I am quite sure, Kirsten, that with this question, that if these group of people were to help, for example, architects of nowadays, of creating something more beautiful, they would present themselves in a different way. And I know that they wouldn't be building watchtowers. They would be doing towers like we see in the contemporary, as we see in the contemporary architecture as well. Because, some of you may know that I love architecture, but I was thinking about this as well. Would they be building, watchtowers like, with bricks and everything? No. I mean, the elements, the resources that they have in the spiritual realm, it escapes our capabilities to understand and to grasp. So I'm quite sure they have more resources, more elements, that we can even imagine in terms of technology. It's, they are Templars, but they're way more than what they present themselves to be. So there is a let's say a context that we need to analyze here, how and the reasons why they were presenting themselves that way. But they were Templars. Yes, it's exactly what Manuel Filomeno de Miranda said.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, there are so many other things we could, sit here and talk about, but because of time, we just had people that were just saying, thank you so much, Leo, for a great presentation. And Rosara saying thank you as well. Um, but do you have any, Leo, do you want to share your final thoughts and also do the final prayer?
Yes, I would like to ask everybody to please read the book. Please read the book. I would love to read text, receive text messages, emails, through the SSB or directly to me, to ask questions or to comment on things that perhaps we didn't comment here. It's too much for us to share. Forgive me if I read a lot because I wanted to really be true to the message. But I would like to ask everyone to, going back to the message that you read, Kirsten, at the beginning of the presentation today, connect with our mentors, connect with the higher minds. It's not easy. We all go through difficulties in our lives that really puts us down, and we see the hurdles, the difficulties in our lives. That doesn't mean our lives is going to change overnight. That doesn't mean we're not going to have negative thoughts that sometimes it's so hard to get rid of or to replace, as Joanna D'Angeli mentions to us. But rest assured that we're here for a purpose. We have a purpose, and we have to find that purpose. The great purposes of life, as well as the small things of life. Look where you work, where you live, and the things that you do. That doesn't mean we're not going to be ourselves, that we shouldn't be ourselves, that we should be the product of the environment, of others. I'm not saying that, because we need to identify who we are and our purpose here. And that doesn't mean we're going to make everybody happy, but there is a greater purpose for all of us. And I think that we can connect with these higher minds and to be part of this team, to be part of the transformations that we are being allowed ourselves to do in this lifetime. That's the message that I would like to leave for everybody, because reading the book and not applying and really identifying to it, it really doesn't serve us any purpose. So I'll leave it at that. I want to thank everyone to follow us in this endeavor. And I would like to ask our Master Jesus in the moment of prayer to guide us. I would like to ask our mentors, the mentors of the SSB, the mentors of the temples that we have connected with in the past, the mentors of nature, all of those higher minds that are so connected with us, because the creator have created all these resources, all of us, for happiness. And we, through our individualist ideals, creating separation, we tend to bring unhappiness to all of us. But as a prayer, we would like to focus on the positive by saying, "Dear Father, Mother God, guide us that we replace the thoughts, the feelings that perturbs us, that we replace with actions, physical actions, spiritual actions, to really change our environment and to look that life prevails. Everything that is of the planet, it stays in the planet. It stays in the physical realm. And everything else that we take with us is God's. It's given to us because we have at least conquer individuality. We have conquered the ability to make a choice. And we plead to one another. Let us choose well. Let us choose life and happiness, and so be it.